Prepare yourself for a jaw-dropping tale of betrayal, deception, and danger. Emma thought she had it all, a perfect marriage, a loving husband, but one shocking discovery tears her world apart. A secret affair, hidden lies, and an unexpected pregnancy send her spiraling into a web of heartbreak. Just when you think it can't get worse, Mark's obsessive brother enters the picture, turning Emma's fight for the truth into a high-stakes battle for her sanity. This story will leave you questioning trust, loyalty, and the shocking lengths people will go to hide their darkest secrets. It's a cool spring evening in 2018, the kind of evening where the sunset paints the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, and the air carries just a hint of warmth, promising that summer isn't far away. In the small, picturesque town of Willow Creek, life seems to flow as gently as the river that runs through it. But behind the quaint storefronts, manicured lawns, and warm smiles, secrets linger like shadows in the fading light. Our story begins at a modest two-story house on Maple Lane, home to our protagonist, Emma Carter. Emma, a 34-year-old freelance graphic designer, lives here with her husband, Mark. At first glance, their life seems perfect. Instagram perfect, if you will. Emma, with her naturally wavy brown hair, kind hazel eyes, and infectious laugh, is the type of person everyone feels at ease around. Mark, on the other hand, is the strong, silent type, a dependable insurance agent with a sharp wit hidden behind his reserved demeanor. Together, they seem like the kind of couple who might grace the cover of a lifestyle magazine. But life, as Emma often reflects, is rarely as perfect as it appears. It's 6 p.m. on a Thursday, and Emma is sitting at her desk in the cozy office she's set up in their spare bedroom. A cup of tea grows cold beside her as she stares at her computer screen, trying to meet the deadline for a project she's been dragging her feet on. The glow of the screen illuminates her face, a mask of concentration mixed with frustration. Her client, a tech startup, has requested changes for the 5th time this week. She exhales sharply, pushing her hair back from her face. Her phone buzzes. It's a text from her best friend, Claire. Claire. Wine night tomorrow, I've got gossip. Emma. Absolutely, I need it. Emma smiles faintly at the screen. Claire is the kind of friend who knows when Emma needs a distraction, and lately, Emma has needed a lot of them. The truth is, things with Mark haven't been easy. Mark comes home later than usual, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house as he sets his keys down on the kitchen counter. Emma hears him and calls out, "Hey, you're late. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Mark replies from the kitchen, his voice flat. "Just got caught up at work." Emma saves her progress on the project and heads downstairs. Mark is standing by the sink, drinking a glass of water. His tie is loosened, and his shirt sleeves are rolled up, revealing the faint tan line on his wrist where his watch normally sits. He looks tired. "You should have called," Emma says lightly, opening the fridge. "I was starting to think you got stuck in traffic forever." Mark chuckles, but it's brief. "Sorry, I didn't think it'd take that long." He glances at her and then away, as if avoiding her gaze. Emma doesn't press him. She's learned not to overthink Mark's distant moods. They ebb and flow, like the tide, and usually pass in a day or two. But tonight, there's a heaviness in the air. She can't quite shake. Let's pause here to introduce a few key players in Emma's life, shall we? First, there's Claire Bennett, Emma's ride or die since high school. Claire is bold, unapologetically outspoken, and fiercely loyal. If Emma is the calm, steady anchor, Claire is the storm, a whirlwind of energy, always chasing the next adventure. Then there's Rachel. Emma's younger sister Rachel lives in the next town over with her husband, Liam, and their 2 kids. While Rachel has always admired Emma's artistic talents, Emma sometimes envies Rachel's settled, family-oriented life. And of course, there's Mark Carter, the man Emma married 10 years ago after meeting at a mutual friend's wedding. Their love story was straight out of a rom-com. Emma spilled red wine on Mark's shirt, and he laughed it off, saying, "Well, I guess this makes us even. I was trying to figure out how to say hello without tripping over my words." Back then, Mark was Emma's rock, but lately, That rock feels more like a wall, and Emma is beginning to feel shut out. The next morning, Emma wakes up to find Mark already gone. His side of the bed is cool to the touch, and a note on the counter reads, "Had to leave early for a meeting, see you tonight, M." Emma pours herself a cup of coffee and tries not to overthink the growing distance between them. But as she's scrolling through her emails, a notification pops up, Mark's name in a group photo on Facebook. It's from the previous evening, posted by a coworker of his, Vanessa. The caption reads, "Team dinner last night, couldn't ask for a better crew." Emma's eyes linger on the photo Mark is there, sitting at the far end of the table. He's smiling, but there's something about the way he's leaning toward Vanessa, who's sitting beside him, that makes Emma pause. Is it nothing probably, but the thought sticks in her mind like a thorn. By the time Emma meets Claire for wine night, she's pushed the photo to the back of her mind, or so she thinks. But as they settle into their usual booth at the local wine bar, Claire catches on right away. "Okay," Claire says, taking a sip of her rosé. "What's up, and don't say nothing, because I know you're nothing face." Emma sighs, swirling her glass of red. "It's probably nothing, but I saw this photo of Mark at a work dinner and I don't know, it felt weird." Claire raises an eyebrow. "Weird how?" "I can't explain it," Emma admits. "It's just something about the way he was leaning toward this coworker, Vanessa." "Probably just me being paranoid." Claire sets her glass down with a thud. "Paranoid, Emma? You're like the least paranoid person I know. If your gut is telling you something, maybe you should listen to it." Emma shakes her head. "No, I'm sure it's fine. He's been distant lately, but work's been crazy for him. I'm not going to jump to conclusions." But as the night wears on, Claire's words echo in Emma's mind. Listen to your gut. Over the next few days, Emma tries to brush off the feeling that something is amiss, but the small nagging doubts begin to pile up, a late-night text from Mark's phone that he brushes off as work stuff, a receipt for a restaurant she's never heard of in his car, and then, one evening, as she's tidying up, Emma finds something tucked into the pocket of Mark's jacket, a small folded note. Her hands tremble as she unfolds it. The handwriting isn't Mark's. It's feminine, loopy, and neat. The note reads, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait for next time. V." Emma's heart pounds in her chest. V. Vanessa. The world seems to tilt around her as she sinks onto the edge of the bed, staring at the note in disbelief. Emma sat on the bed, the small note trembling in her hands as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. The elegant handwriting and the single initial V confirmed what her gut had been screaming for days now. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. For a long moment, she just stared at the note, her thoughts racing. Should she confront Mark? Should she call Claire? Should she pretend she hadn't found it? Eventually, she folded the note and slid it back into Mark's jacket pocket, not because she wanted to forget it, but because she needed to gather more information. Confronting him without proof, she reasoned, would only give him a chance to lie. The next morning, Mark left early again, claiming he had back-to-back meetings. Emma waited until she heard the rumble of his car disappearing down the street before she grabbed his laptop from the living room. Emma wasn't proud of what she was about to do, but she felt like she had no other choice. She powered it on, and to her relief, realized Mark hadn't logged out of his email. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, her heart racing. Did she really want to see what might be hidden in those messages? Yes, she did. She typed Vanessa into the search bar and hit enter. At first, nothing seemed suspicious, just a few work-related emails, but then, buried among the others, she found a message from Mark to Vanessa, time-stamped 3 weeks ago, titled, "Dinner Plans." Her eyes scanned the email. Mark. "Looking forward to it, I'll meet you at 8. Let's keep this between us, okay?" Emma's stomach twisted into knots. There was no ambiguity here. Whatever this was, it wasn't innocent. Emma didn't hesitate. She called Claire, her voice shaking as she recounted what she'd found. "Claire, I think Mark is having an affair," Emma whispered, pacing the living room. Claire didn't even pause. "Stay right there, I'm coming over." Within 20 minutes, Claire burst through the front door, a bottle of wine in one hand and a determined look on her face. "Okay," she said, setting the bottle on the counter. "Show me everything." Emma handed her the note and pulled up the email on Mark's laptop. Claire's eyes narrowed as she read the messages. "This isn't just suspicious, Em. This is proof. What are you going to do?" Emma shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know, confront him. Demand answers. But what if he denies it? What if he says it's all in my head?" Claire placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "If he's lying, you'll know. But don't let him gaslight you into thinking you're crazy. You deserve the truth." That evening, Emma sat across from Mark at the dinner table. She tried to keep her tone casual as they ate, but her nerves made her voice tremble. "How was work today?" she asked, spearing a piece of roasted chicken with her fork. Mark barely looked up from his plate. "Busy meetings all day, you?" "Same old," Emma replied. Then after a pause, she added, "Oh, by the way, I found something interesting when I was tidying up." Mark froze mid-chew, his eyes darting up to meet hers. "Oh, what's that?" Emma leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "A note in your jacket pocket." Mark's face betrayed a flicker of panic before he quickly masked it. "A note? What kind of note?" "Something about last night being incredible," Emma said, her voice calm but her heart pounding. Mark set his fork down, leaning back in his chair. "Emma, it's not what you think," he began, his voice steady but defensive. "Vanessa and we're just coworkers. She wrote that as a joke after a team dinner. It wasn't serious." Emma raised an eyebrow, her suspicion deepening. "A joke? That's a pretty strange joke, don't you think?" Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I can't control what other people say, but there's nothing going on. You have to trust me." But Emma didn't trust him, not anymore. Over the next week, things between Emma and Mark grew increasingly strained. He was out late more often, his excuses becoming less believable. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, and the distance between them felt like a chasm she couldn't bridge. Claire, ever the supportive best friend, urged Emma to dig deeper. "You deserve to know the truth," she insisted during one of their late-night phone calls. "If he's lying to you, you need to call him out." But Emma wasn't ready for that yet. She wanted undeniable proof before she confronted him again. And so, she waited, watching and listening for any sign that her suspicions were correct. One evening, as Emma was folding laundry in the bedroom, Mark's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He had left it unlocked, and curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up and swiped to read the message. It was from Vanessa. "Vanessa. Missing you already, can't wait for our next trip." Emma's breath caught in her throat, a trip Mark hadn't mentioned any trips. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through their conversation. There it was, plane tickets booked for the following weekend, a hotel reservation for 2. Her world shattered in that moment. When Mark came home that night, Emma was waiting for him in the living room. The evidence sat on the coffee table. Her printed screenshots of the messages, the plane tickets, the note she had found weeks ago. Mark stopped in his tracks when he saw it all laid out before him, his face paled. "Emma," he began, but she held up a hand to silence him. Just don't," she said, her voice breaking. "I've seen enough, I know." Mark sank into the chair opposite her, his hands covering his face. For the first time in their marriage, Emma saw him for who he truly was, a man who had betrayed her trust and shattered the life they had built together. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Emma laughed bitterly, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't mean for it to go this far. Do you hear yourself, Mark? You lied to me over and over again." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice pleading. "I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." But Emma wasn't sure if there was anything left to fix. The next few days were a blur. Mark promised to cut ties with Vanessa and begged Emma to give him another chance. But Emma couldn't shake the betrayal she felt, or the growing realization that the man she had loved for so long was a stranger to her now. Claire was by her side through it all, offering advice, tissues, and endless glasses of wine. "You don't have to decide right away," Claire reminded her. "But whatever you choose, make sure it's what's best for you." Emma nodded, though deep down, she knew that moving on might be the only way to heal. The days following Emma's confrontation with Mark felt like walking through a minefield. Every interaction was strained, and the silence between them was louder than their brief, clipped conversations. Mark had moved into the guest bedroom, a symbolic gesture that neither of them could fully articulate. It was as though they were living in two separate worlds under the same roof. Emma tried to focus on her work, but her mind was clouded with doubt, anger, and heartbreak. Even Claire, who usually had the perfect advice for every situation, struggled to find the right words this time. "You don't owe him forgiveness, Em," Claire said one evening over the phone. "But you do owe yourself some clarity. What do you really want?" Emma stared out the window at the darkening sky, her chest tight with emotion. "I don't even know anymore." One evening, Emma came home to find Mark sitting in the living room. The coffee table was clear, the evidence of his betrayal nowhere in sight. He looked up as she walked in, his face pale and drawn. "Emma," he began, his voice low and hoarse. "We need to talk." She didn't want to hear it, not after everything. But she sat down anyway, folding her arms across her chest. "What is it?" Mark hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I've ended it with Vanessa. I told her it's over." Emma raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And I'm supposed to believe that just like that?" His shoulders slumped, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I know I've destroyed your trust. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you, I made a mistake. No, I made a series of mistakes, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Emma stared at him, her emotions swirling like a storm. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of his betrayal ran too deep. "I don't know if that's possible, Mark," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You broke us." Over the next few days, Mark seemed to double down on his efforts to repair their relationship. He took time off work, planned dinner dates, and even booked a couples therapy session. But for Emma, it all felt hollow, like putting a fresh coat of paint on a crumbling wall. Then came the night of the ultimatum. Emma and Mark sat across from each other at the dining table, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "Emma, I need to know, are you willing to give us another chance?" Her hands tightened around her wine glass. "I don't know, Mark. How can I, when I don't even recognize the person sitting in front of me?" His jaw tightened, frustration and desperation flickering in his eyes. "I've admitted I was wrong. I've ended things with Vanessa. What more can I do?" Emma shook her head, tears welling up. "It's not about what you can do, Mark. It's about what you've already done." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Mark leaned forward, his voice cracking. "Then tell me what you want, Emma. Do you want a divorce? Is that what this is?" Emma didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was, she didn't know what she wanted anymore. Just as Emma was beginning to consider taking some time apart, fate threw a curveball. One afternoon, she received a message on Facebook from an unfamiliar account. The profile picture was blank, and the name was just a set of initials, LT. The message read, "I know about Mark and Vanessa. There's more to the story than he's telling you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She immediately messaged back, "Who are you? What do you know?" The reply came almost instantly. "I'm someone who cares. Meet me tomorrow at the Willow Cafe, 2 p.m. Emma debated whether to ignore the message or follow through, but curiosity got the better of her. If there was more to the story, she needed to know. The next day, Emma sat at a corner table in the Willow Cafe, nervously stirring her coffee. The cafe was bustling with the usual midday crowd, but Emma's attention was fixed on the door. Then, a woman walked in, a petite brunette with sharp features and a nervous energy that matched Emma's own. "Emma?" the woman asked, her voice hesitant. Emma nodded. You must be LT. The woman sat down across from her, clutching a small handbag in her lap. My name is Lisa Turner. I'm Vanessa's friend. Emma's breath caught. What do you want? Lisa glanced around nervously before leaning in. I felt like you deserved to know the truth. Vanessa isn't just some coworker Mark had an affair with. She's been seeing him for over a year, and this wasn't her first time with a married man. Emma's mind reeled. A year. He said it was just a mistake, a brief lapse in judgment. Lisa shook her head. It wasn't. I tried to tell Vanessa to end it, but she wouldn't listen. She said Mark was different, that he was going to leave you for her. Emma's stomach churned. The betrayal ran deeper than she'd imagined. That evening, Emma confronted Mark once again. This time, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing herself. You lied to me, she said, her voice shaking with anger. You said it was over, that it was just a mistake, but it wasn't, was it? It was a year of lies. Mark's face fell, the color draining from his cheeks. Emma, don't, she snapped, cutting him off. I met someone today, Lisa Turner. She told me everything. Mark's eyes widened in shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the full extent of the damage he'd done. I gave you a chance to come clean, Emma continued, her voice breaking. But you couldn't even do that. I don't know who you are anymore, Mark, and I don't want to. After weeks of turmoil, Emma finally made the decision that had been weighing on her heart. She couldn't stay, not after everything she'd learned. Mark's betrayal had shattered their marriage, and no amount of apologies or therapy sessions could piece it back together. The next morning, she packed her bags and left, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Mark, I deserve more than lies and broken promises. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not me. Emma. As Emma drove away from the house that had once been her sanctuary, she felt a strange mix of emotions, grief for what she'd lost, but also a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. The road stretched out before her, endless and open, and though she didn't know where it would lead, she knew one thing for certain: she was ready to find herself again. Emma's decision to leave marked a turning point, but her journey was far from over. As she adjusted to her new reality, she stayed with Claire for the time being, trying to figure out her next steps. Boxes of her belongings were stacked neatly in Claire's spare room, a stark reminder of everything she had left behind. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a semblance of peace. But that peace was fragile, and deep down, she knew the story with Mark wasn't over yet, not with so many loose ends still dangling in the air. One evening, as the two friends shared a bottle of wine on Claire's balcony, Emma stared into the fading sunset, her thoughts heavy. Do you think I made the right choice? She asked quietly. Claire didn't hesitate. You made the brave choice, Em. That doesn't mean it was easy, but it was what you needed to do. Emma nodded, though the doubt still lingered in her heart. A week later, Emma received an unexpected text from Mark. Mark. We need to talk. There's something I need to tell you. Please. Emma stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. She had no intention of rekindling their relationship, but curiosity gnawed at her. What could he possibly have to say now? After a long pause, she typed back. Emma. Fine. Tomorrow, noon, at the park. The next day, Emma arrived early, her heart pounding. Mark was already there, sitting on a bench under a sprawling oak tree. He looked tired, his normally confident demeanor replaced by an air of vulnerability. Emma approached cautiously, keeping her distance. You wanted to talk, so talk. Mark stood, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Emma crossed her arms, her defenses firmly in place. I'm listening. Mark took a deep breath, his gaze meeting hers. Vanessa wasn't just my mistake, she's pregnant. The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The world around her seemed to blur as the weight of Mark's confession sank in. "You... what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark's shoulders slumped, his expression one of guilt and shame. "It wasn't planned, it just happened. I didn't know how to tell you." Emma took a step back, her mind racing. This wasn't just another betrayal. It was a betrayal that would tie Mark and Vanessa together forever. The magnitude of it was overwhelming. "Did you know before I left?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Mark hesitated, then nodded. "I found out the day after you confronted me. That's why I ended things with her. I didn't want to drag you into this mess." Emma laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "You didn't want to drag me into this, Mark. You already did. Every lie, every secret. You dragged me through all of it." Mark reached out as if to touch her, but Emma stepped back. "Don't," she said, her voice firm. "I needed to hear this, but I'm done. Whatever happens next, it's not my problem anymore." Without another word, she turned and walked away, tears streaming down her face. That night, Emma shared Mark's confession with Claire, who was equally shocked. "That man has some nerve," Claire fumed, pacing the living room. "Pregnant? Seriously? And he thought he could fix this?" Emma shook her head, her emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and relief. "It doesn't matter anymore. I'm done with him." But as much as she wanted to move on, the revelation left a scar. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that the life she thought she had with Mark had been built on lies. Now, she was left to rebuild herself from the ground up. Amidst the chaos, Emma received an unexpected email from a design agency she had admired for years. They had seen her work on social media and wanted to interview her for a senior designer position. The opportunity was like a beacon of hope, a chance to start fresh and focus on something that truly mattered to her. Emma threw herself into preparing for the interview, pouring her energy into her portfolio and presentations. On the day of the interview, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in months. The panel loved her work, and a week later, she received the call she had been waiting for. She got the job. For the first time, Emma felt like she was reclaiming her life. Just as Emma was beginning to find her footing, Mark showed up at Claire's house unannounced. Claire answered the door, her expression icy. "You have some nerve showing up here." Mark held up his hands defensively. "I just need to talk to Emma, please." Claire hesitated, then turned to call Emma reluctantly. Emma stepped outside, crossing her arms as she faced Mark. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked, her tone exasperated. I need closure," Mark said, his voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I know I can't fix what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." Emma studied him, her emotions a whirlwind. She had spent weeks angry and hurt, but now, looking at him, she felt something unexpected. Pity. Mark was a broken man, but he was no longer her responsibility. "I accept your apology," Emma said finally, her voice steady. "But that doesn't change anything. We're done, Mark. I hope you find peace, but it won't be with me." Mark nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I hope you find peace too." With that, Emma turned and went back inside, closing the door on their chapter for good. Months passed, and Emma's life took on a new rhythm. Her new job was challenging but fulfilling, and she even started taking yoga classes to help clear her mind. She reconnected with old friends, went on solo hikes, and began rediscovering the parts of herself she had lost during her marriage. One afternoon, as she walked through the park, she spotted a group of wildflowers growing along the path. They reminded her of the resilience she had found within herself, a quiet, unyielding strength that had carried her through the darkest of times. Emma's life had begun to stabilize. She was settling into her new job, reconnecting with herself, and even finding moments of genuine happiness. For the first time in years, she felt free, but as much as she tried to move forward, the shadows of her past still lingered. One evening, while sorting through a box of old memories, she stumbled upon her wedding album. The sight of the photos, her radiant smile, Mark's loving gaze, sent a pang through her chest. It was a stark reminder of what they had shared, and what had been lost. She closed the album, pushing it aside. No more looking back, she whispered to herself. The next morning, Emma stopped by a local cafe to grab her usual latte before work. As she waited in line, a familiar voice behind her made her freeze. Emma? She turned slowly, her heart sinking. It was Vanessa. Vanessa stood there, her expression a mixture of surprise and hesitation. She looked different, tired, almost fragile. Emma felt her pulse quicken, a surge of emotions bubbling to the surface. What do you want, Vanessa? Emma asked, her tone firm but not unkind. I wanted to apologize, Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything I know, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say it. Emma stared at her, searching for sincerity in her eyes. She could see it, the regret, the guilt. And while a part of her wanted to lash out, another part of her felt an odd sense of pity. I appreciate the apology, Emma said finally, but I don't think there's anything left to say. Vanessa nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I understand. For what it's worth. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. As Vanessa turned to leave, Emma felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough to let her breathe a little easier. Just as Emma was beginning to feel like she had put the past behind her, life threw her another curveball. One evening, as she was leaving work, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. Unknown. There's something you need to know about Mark and Vanessa. Meet me at the pier tomorrow at 6 p.m. Come alone. Emma's stomach churned. She debated ignoring the message, but curiosity, and a lingering sense of unfinished business, got the better of her. The following evening, Emma arrived at the pier, her nerves on edge. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. She spotted a man standing at the end of the pier, his silhouette unfamiliar. As she approached, the man turned to face her. He looked to be in his late 30s, with a rugged demeanor and piercing eyes. You're Emma, he said, more a statement than a question. And you are? She asked, keeping her distance. My name is Andrew, he replied. I'm Vanessa's ex. Emma's eyebrows shot up. What do you want? Andrew took a deep breath. I know this is none of my business, but Vanessa and Mark aren't done. They've been meeting in secret. Emma felt her heart drop. What are you talking about? Mark told me it was over. Andrew shook his head. I thought Vanessa had changed, but she hasn't. I found messages between them, plans to meet, promises to figure things out. He handed Emma a stack of printed texts. She hesitated before taking them, her hands trembling as she read the messages. They were undeniable. Mark and Vanessa were still in contact, still lying, still betraying her trust. Emma's anger boiled over. She drove straight to Mark's new apartment, the texts clenched in her hand. When he opened the door, his face paled at the sight of her. Emma, he began, but she didn't let him finish. Don't you dare say my name, she snapped, shoving the texts into his chest. You lied to me again. Mark glanced at the messages, his expression a mix of guilt and panic. I can explain. Don't bother, Emma interrupted, her voice trembling with rage. I gave you every chance to come clean, Mark, every chance to be honest, but you couldn't do it, you couldn't stop lying. Mark's shoulders slumped, his facade crumbling. I didn't want to hurt you again. Emma laughed bitterly. Too late for that. You've done nothing but hurt me. But you know what? I'm done letting you. With that, she turned and walked away, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, she felt a sense of finality, a sense that she was truly free. In the days that followed, Emma poured her energy into building the life she wanted. She focused on her new job, joined a local hiking group, and even signed up for an art class. Slowly but surely, she began to rediscover who she was outside of her marriage. One evening, as she worked on a painting in her small studio, Claire stopped by with a bottle of wine. You're glowing, Claire said, grinning as she handed Emma a glass. I don't think I've ever seen you this happy. Emma smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. I think I'm finally finding myself again. Claire raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings. A few weeks later, Emma received a letter in the mail. It was from Mark. She hesitated before opening it, unsure if she wanted to hear anything more from him, but curiosity won out. The letter was brief, an apology for everything he had done and an acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. He ended it with a simple wish. I hope you find the happiness I couldn't give you. Emma folded the letter and set it aside. It didn't change anything, but it gave her a sense of closure, a final chapter to the story she had been trying to leave behind. With the past finally behind her, Emma focused on the future. She continued to thrive in her new job, building a reputation as a talented designer. She made new friends, explored new hobbies, and even began to entertain the idea of dating again. One sunny afternoon, as she strolled through the park, she noticed a man sketching on a bench. He looked up and smiled, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a spark, a small but promising glimmer of what could be. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And that was enough. Life had settled into a fragile rhythm for Emma. She'd done everything in her power to move forward. Therapy sessions, reconnecting with old friends, and even embarking on solo trips to explore the nearby countryside. But every so often, the scars of the past resurfaced in quiet moments, leaving her breathless with the weight of her own thoughts. One such moment came on a rainy evening when Emma found herself flipping through an old sketch pad she hadn't touched in years. The drawings were from a simpler time, filled with memories of laughter and love. One page in particular stopped her, a charcoal portrait she had drawn of Mark during their honeymoon. His eyes were alive with joy, his smile carefree. It was almost unrecognizable now. She closed the sketch pad with a sigh, the rain tapping softly against the window pane. The past was behind her, but its shadow remained. Just as Emma was beginning to feel like her wounds were healing, a surprising email disrupted her newfound peace. The subject line read, "You need to know the truth." The sender's name was unfamiliar, but curiosity compelled Emma to open it. Inside was a single line of text. Mark isn't done, and neither is Vanessa. Be careful. Her heart raced as she stared at the screen. What could this mean? She had left that chapter of her life behind, or so she thought. Why was someone dredging it up again, and who could it be? Emma forwarded the email to Claire, who called her almost immediately. "What the hell is this?" Claire demanded, her voice laced with concern. "I don't know," Emma admitted, "but whoever it is, they know something." Claire hesitated. "Do you think it's real, or just someone messing with you?" "I don't know," Emma repeated, her voice barely a whisper, "but I'm going to find out." Emma's search for answers led her to dig into the email's source. She reached out to an old college friend, Ryan, who worked in cybersecurity. Within hours, Ryan had traced the email to a small town 2 hours away, a town Emma vaguely remembered as Vanessa's hometown. Ryan's advice was clear: ignore it. Whoever sent this is probably trying to stir up trouble. But Emma couldn't ignore it. The nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't let her. So, the next morning, she packed a bag and drove to the town, her determination outweighing her fear. The small town was quiet, its streets lined with charming old buildings and cozy cafes. Emma parked her car and walked into the only diner in town, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of familiarity. She didn't have to wait long. Vanessa was there, sitting in a corner booth, her face pale and drawn. When their eyes met, Vanessa froze, her expression a mixture of shock and guilt. Emma approached the table, her heart pounding. "Vanessa," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Vanessa looked like she wanted to bolt, but seemed to think better of it. "Emma," she replied, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "I got an email," Emma said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Someone told me to be careful. What's going on?" Vanessa hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. Finally, she leaned in, her voice low. "It's Mark. He's been trying to contact me. He says he wants to fix things, but I told him no." Emma's stomach twisted. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's not the same person he used to be, Vanessa whispered. He's angry, obsessive. I don't know what he's capable of. Emma drove home with Vanessa's words echoing in her mind. She had wanted to believe that she was done with Mark, that his presence in her life was over, but now, it seemed he wasn't ready to let go. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her driveway. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have talked to Vanessa. You'll regret it. Emma's blood ran cold. She showed the message to Claire, who immediately urged her to go to the police. This isn't a coincidence, Claire said, pacing the living room. He's trying to scare you. Don't let him. Emma nodded, but her fear was palpable. She had thought she was free, but Mark's shadow loomed larger than ever. The next morning, Emma went to the police station to file a report. The officer on duty listened patiently as she explained the situation, but his response was cautious. Without concrete evidence, there's not much we can do, he said. But we'll keep an eye on things. Let us know if you receive any more threats. Emma left the station feeling both relieved and frustrated. She had taken the first step to protect herself, but it didn't feel like enough. The tension reached its peak 2 nights later. Emma was working late in her home studio when she heard a noise outside. Her heart pounded as she moved to the window, peering into the darkness. At first, she saw nothing. But then, a shadow moved near the edge of her yard. Grabbing her phone, she called Claire. Someone's outside, she whispered, her voice shaking. Call the police, Claire urged. I'm on my way. Emma dialed 911, her hands trembling. As she waited for the police to arrive, she stayed near the window, watching the shadow move closer. It was Mark. She was sure of it. When the police arrived, the figure had disappeared, but Emma's fear lingered. The officer assured her they would patrol the area, but Emma knew this wasn't over. The following day, Emma received another text from the unknown number. You can't hide forever. That was the final straw. Emma packed her bags and left for Claire's house, determined not to face this alone. As she sat on the couch, Claire placed a comforting arm around her. This ends now, Claire said firmly. We'll get through this together. Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. She was done being a victim. It was time to take control of her life. Emma and Claire devised a plan to confront Mark one last time, but this time on her terms. With the help of the police, they set up a meeting in a public place, ensuring Emma's safety. When Mark arrived, he looked disheveled, his demeanor erratic. Emma stood her ground, her voice steady. This is the last time we speak, Mark. Whatever you're holding on to, let it go. I'm done. Mark's eyes flashed with anger, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma with a sense of relief and finality. For the first time in months, Emma felt a sense of peace. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and taken control of her future. As she sat with Claire that evening, watching the sunset, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This is the beginning of something new, Emma said, a small smile playing on her lips. Claire raised her glass in a toast. To freedom. The encounter with Mark at the public meeting felt like a final battle, one that Emma had won not with anger, but with strength. Still, her victory was bittersweet. There were no cheers, no celebrations, just a quiet resolve that this chapter of her life was closing. Emma spent the following days at Claire's house, trying to process everything. She journaled her thoughts, filling pages with memories, questions, and reflections. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened, not just the betrayal, but also the loss of the life she had envisioned with Mark. As she poured her emotions onto the page, she felt a surprising sense of clarity. She wasn't broken. She wasn't ruined. She was simply in transition, moving toward something new. One morning, as Emma was sipping her coffee on Claire's balcony, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months. Rachel. Her younger sister had been her confidant growing up, but they had drifted apart in recent years. Seeing her name now, after everything Emma had been through, felt like a lifeline. Rachel, Emma said, her voice warm but cautious as she answered. Emma, Rachel replied, her tone filled with concern. I heard about everything. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. Emma's throat tightened. It's okay, I've had Claire and I'm figuring it out. Well, Rachel said firmly, you don't have to figure it out alone anymore. Come stay with us for a while. The kids would love to see their Aunt Emma, and I think you could use a change of scenery. Emma hesitated, the idea both appealing and daunting. I'll think about it. Rachel didn't push, but Emma could hear the relief in her voice. Take your time, just know we're here for you. Despite the progress Emma had made, there was one loose end that continued to gnaw at her. The anonymous email, who had sent it, and why she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been trying to warn her, and she needed answers. She reached out to Ryan again, asking if he could dig deeper into the email's origin. A few hours later, he called her back. The email was sent through a proxy server, Ryan explained. Whoever sent it didn't want to be traced, but I did find one thing. The account was created using Vanessa's name. Emma's heart sank. Had Vanessa sent the email? And if so, what was her motive? Was it a warning or another layer of manipulation? Emma decided to confront Vanessa one last time. She drove back to the small town and found Vanessa at the same diner, sitting alone with a cup of coffee. Vanessa looked up as Emma approached, her expression wary. Emma, I didn't think I'd see you again. I need to know the truth, Emma said, sliding into the booth across from her. Did you send me that email? Vanessa's eyes widened. What email? Emma pulled out her phone, showing Vanessa the message. Vanessa stared at it, her face pale. I didn't send this, but I think I know who did. Vanessa explained that Mark had been pressuring her to reconcile, despite her repeated refusals. He said he wanted to fix things, but I think he just didn't want to be alone. If he knew about this email, he might have sent it to push us both into a confrontation. Emma's stomach churned. If Mark was behind the email, it meant he was more manipulative than she had realized. After leaving Vanessa, Emma contacted the police again, sharing everything she had learned. This time, they took her concerns more seriously, agreeing to keep an eye on Mark's activities. Emma also took steps to protect herself, installing a security system at her home and sharing her location with Claire and Rachel whenever she traveled. She wasn't living in fear, but she wasn't taking any chances either. One sunny afternoon, Emma decided to visit a local art gallery to clear her mind. As she wandered through the exhibits, admiring the vibrant paintings and intricate sculptures, she noticed a man sketching in the corner of the room. He was tall, with dark hair and a thoughtful expression. His sketch pad was filled with detailed drawings of the artwork around them, each stroke precise and intentional. Emma hesitated before approaching him. Those are incredible, she said, nodding toward his sketches. The man looked up, his face lighting up with a smile. Thank you. It's a bit of a hobby. They introduced themselves, his name was Adam, and spent the next hour talking about art, life, and everything in between. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a spark of genuine connection. Emma and Adam exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet for coffee later in the week. It wasn't a grand romance, but it was a step forward, a reminder that life could still hold surprises, even after heartbreak. As Emma walked home that evening, she felt a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in months. She wasn't defined by her past, and she wasn't afraid of her future. She was simply living, one step at a time. The turning point in Emma's journey wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a sudden epiphany. It was a quiet realization, a moment of clarity as she sat on her porch one evening, watching the stars. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to carry the weight of Mark's betrayal or Vanessa's lies. She was free to be herself, to chase her dreams, to build a life that brought her joy. And in that moment, Emma knew she was going to be okay. Emma's life had finally settled into a fragile peace. Her connection with Adam was growing slowly, a refreshing change from the chaos she had endured. She spent her days working, exploring new hobbies, and reconnecting with her family. But beneath the surface, a part of her remained vigilant, bracing for the other shoe to drop. One rainy evening, as Emma curled up on the couch with a book, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." Emma's chest tightened. She immediately called Claire, her voice trembling. "It's him. I know it's Mark." "Emma," Claire said firmly, "you've done everything right. You've told the police. You've taken precautions. Don't let him pull you back into his game." But the message lingered in Emma's mind, a shadow over her newfound peace. The next morning, Emma received a call from the police. The officer informed her that they had brought Mark in for questioning after his continued attempts to contact her and Vanessa. "He denies sending the messages," the officer said, "but we're keeping an eye on him." Emma hung up, a mixture of relief and frustration swirling within her. While she was grateful the authorities were involved, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't done. Later that day, Emma confided in Adam about everything. His calm demeanor and thoughtful words were a source of comfort. "You're stronger than you think, Emma," he said, taking her hand. "Whatever happens, you'll face it head-on, just like you always have." 2 weeks passed without incident, and Emma began to let her guard down. But just as she was starting to feel safe, a startling discovery brought everything crashing down. Emma was cleaning out her email inbox when she stumbled upon an unread message buried among spam. The subject line read, "You need to see this." The email contained a series of photos, grainy, low-quality images taken from a distance. They showed Emma at various points in her daily life, walking to her car, sitting at a cafe, even laughing with Adam at the park. A chill ran down her spine. Someone had been watching her. Emma immediately called the police, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. The officer assured her they would investigate, but the photos confirmed her worst fear. She was being stalked. That night, Emma barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside her window set her on edge. The next morning, Claire showed up unannounced, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "You're not staying here alone," Claire declared, throwing her overnight bag on the couch. "We're going to get through this together." Emma felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Claire. I don't know what I'd do without you." For the next few days, the two friends stayed glued to each other, keeping the lights on at night and double-checking every lock. But even with Claire's presence, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One evening, as Emma and Claire were watching a movie, the power suddenly went out. The room plunged into darkness, the silence broken only by the sound of Emma's shaky breathing. "Stay here," Claire whispered, grabbing her phone to use as a flashlight. Emma's heart pounded as Claire cautiously checked the circuit breaker. Moments later, she returned, her face pale. The main switch was flipped from outside. Panic surged through Emma. "He's here." Claire called the police, her voice steady despite the tension. Within minutes, officers arrived and searched the property. They found no sign of Mark or anyone else, but the incident left Emma rattled. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. The next day, Emma decided she couldn't live in fear any longer. She contacted her lawyer, determined to take legal action against Mark. Restraining orders, lawsuits, whatever it took to protect herself, she was ready to pursue it. Meanwhile, Adam offered his unwavering support. "You're not alone in this," he assured her. "We'll face it together." With a renewed sense of purpose, Emma began documenting every interaction, every suspicious message, every moment that felt off. She was building a case, determined to hold Mark accountable. Just as Emma felt she was gaining the upper hand, a shocking twist turned everything on its head. Vanessa called her out of the blue, her voice frantic. "Emma," Vanessa said, "I need to talk to you. It's about Mark." Emma hesitated, but the urgency in Vanessa's voice convinced her to meet. They sat down at a quiet cafe, and Vanessa wasted no time getting to the point. "It wasn't Mark sending those messages," Vanessa said, her eyes wide with fear. "It was his brother, David." Emma froze. "David, why?" Vanessa swallowed hard. "He blames you for Mark's downfall. He thinks you ruined his life, and he's obsessed with making you pay." The revelation sent Emma into a tailspin. Mark had been a threat, but now she realized there was someone even more dangerous lurking in the shadows. David's involvement added a new layer of complexity and danger to the situation. Emma immediately informed the police, sharing everything Vanessa had told her. They promised to investigate, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with thoughts of David. She didn't know much about him, but the little she did know was unsettling. He was manipulative, cunning, and deeply loyal to Mark. If he truly believed Emma was to blame, there was no telling what he might do. The tension reached its peak when Emma received another anonymous message. "You can't run forever. See you soon." This time, Emma refused to cower in fear. She called the police, informing them of the message, and coordinated with Claire and Adam to create a safety plan. Every precaution was taken, every detail considered. Emma was ready to face whatever came next. When the knock on her door finally came, Emma's heart raced. She peeked through the peephole, her breath catching when she saw David standing on the porch, his face twisted with anger. "Open the door, Emma," he demanded, his voice muffled but menacing. Emma stepped back, her phone in hand. "The police are already on their way," she called out, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. David pounded on the door, shouting threats, but Emma held her ground. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the air, and David's shouts turned into curses as he fled into the night. David was apprehended a few blocks away, his erratic behavior and threatening messages sealing his fate. The police assured Emma that he would face charges for harassment and stalking, and a sense of relief washed over her. The nightmare was finally over. In the days that followed, Emma began to rebuild her life with a renewed sense of strength. She deepened her connection with Adam, continued to thrive at work, and embraced the support of her family and friends. One sunny afternoon, as she walked through the park, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The shadows of her past no longer haunted her. She was free to live, to love, and to embrace the future. With David in police custody, Emma finally felt the weight of the chaos beginning to lift. It wasn't an overnight change. Healing would take time, but for the first time in months, she felt safe. She spent the next few days putting her life back together, leaning on her close-knit support system. Claire, ever the protector, refused to let Emma spend a single moment alone. Adam, meanwhile, was a constant presence, offering quiet strength and encouragement. "You're stronger than anyone I know," Adam said one evening as they walked through the park. His words weren't meant to flatter, but to remind Emma of the resilience she had shown through it all. While David's arrest marked a turning point, Emma realized there was still one loose end she needed to address. Mark. Though she had moved on emotionally, she felt a lingering need for closure. So, after much consideration, she agreed to meet him in a neutral, public setting. The coffee shop where they met was bustling with chatter and the hum of espresso machines, but to Emma, the noise felt distant. Mark arrived looking subdued, a far cry from the confident man she had once married. "Emma," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to," Emma said calmly. "I didn't come here for apologies or explanations. I came here to say goodbye." Mark looked startled, as though the reality of their finality hadn't sunk in until that moment. "Goodbye?" Emma nodded. "I've forgiven myself for everything that happened, and I think it's time I forgive you too, but that doesn't mean I want you in my life." Mark's shoulders slumped, his expression a mixture of guilt and acceptance. "I understand, I hope you find happiness, Emma." "I already have," she replied, her voice steady. As she left the cafe, Emma felt an unexpected sense of peace. She had closed the door on her past, and she wasn't looking back. To mark the end of a tumultuous chapter, Claire and Adam organized a small gathering for Emma, a celebration of her resilience and the new life she was building. Rachel and her kids came, bringing laughter and joy that filled the room. As Emma stood surrounded by her loved ones, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. For standing by me when I couldn't stand on my own." Claire raised her glass. "To Emma, the strongest person I know." The group cheered, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma laughed without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, Emma threw herself into her work with renewed passion. Her designs caught the attention of a major client, who offered her a lucrative contract. The opportunity was a dream come true, and Emma didn't hesitate to accept. As she worked late one evening, sketching ideas for the new project, Adam stopped by with takeout and a bouquet of wildflowers. "For the artist," he said, grinning. Emma smiled, her heart full. The wildflowers reminded her of her own journey, imperfect but resilient, growing despite the odds. One sunny morning, Emma and Adam decided to take a road trip, a spontaneous adventure to celebrate their newfound freedom. They packed light, loaded up the car, and hit the open road, the wind rushing through the windows as they laughed and sang along to the radio. The journey was more than a getaway. It was a symbol of the life Emma was reclaiming. Every mile they traveled felt like a step further from the pain of the past and closer to the promise of the future. Just as Emma was beginning to feel like her life was back on track, she received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address was from the county jail, and the sender's name made her stomach drop: David. She hesitated before opening it, unsure if she wanted to hear anything he had to say, but curiosity won out. The letter was brief. "Emma, I wanted to apologize. My actions were inexcusable, and I've come to realize how much pain I caused you. I hope someday you can forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it. David." Emma set the letter aside, her emotions conflicted. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but she realized that holding on to anger wouldn't serve her either. For her own peace, she decided to let it go. As Emma continued to rebuild her life, she found herself embracing the present in ways she never had before. She took up painting again, joined a local book club, and even started teaching a design class at the community center. Every day felt like a step closer to the person she was meant to be. One evening, as she stood in her studio, finishing a vibrant painting of a wildflower field, Adam walked in. He wrapped his arms around her, his voice soft. "You're amazing, you know that?" Emma smiled, leaning into him. "I'm finally starting to believe it." The final turning point came when Emma received an invitation to speak at a women's empowerment event. The organizers had heard about her story and wanted her to share her journey of resilience and growth. Standing on the stage, looking out at the crowd, Emma felt a surge of confidence. "We are not defined by what happens to us," she said, her voice steady. "We are defined by how we choose to rise above it." The audience erupted in applause, and Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had turned her pain into purpose, and in doing so, she had found her own strength. As Emma walked out of the event that evening, the cool night air felt invigorating. She glanced up at the stars, a quiet smile on her face. Her journey had been anything but easy, but it had led her here, to a place of peace, hope, and endless possibilities. With Adam by her side, her loved ones cheering her on, and a future that felt brighter than ever, Emma knew one thing for certain: she was ready for whatever came next. The storm that had uprooted Emma's life had finally passed. The chaos of Mark's betrayal, David's threats, and Vanessa's entanglement had left scars, but they were no longer wounds, just reminders of what Emma had survived. Each day felt like a step further from the pain of her past and closer to a future she was building with her own hands. Emma's life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. The echoes of what had happened no longer haunted her, but instead served as fuel for her growth. Every challenge, every heartbreak had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. One day, Emma received an envelope in the mail. It was from Mark, and inside was a simple handwritten letter. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that happened. I hurt you in ways I can't undo, and I will carry that regret for the rest of my life. I'm writing this not to ask for forgiveness, but to say thank you. For the years we shared, for the love we once had, and for the lessons I've learned. I hope you've found the happiness you deserve." Arkirki. Emma folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She didn't need closure from Mark anymore, but his words felt like the final punctuation to their story. For the first time, she truly felt free. In the months following the chaos, Emma's life blossomed in ways she hadn't imagined. Her work as a graphic designer flourished, and her paintings, once a private passion, began gaining attention in the local art scene. Claire, ever the supportive best friend, convinced Emma to host a small art show at a local gallery. It was a nerve-wracking prospect, but Emma decided to take the leap. The evening of the show, Emma stood in the gallery surrounded by her work. Each piece told a story of pain, resilience, and rebirth. Friends, family, and strangers admired her art, offering praise and encouragement. Adam was there, of course, standing proudly by her side. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice warm. "So have we," Emma replied, smiling. As Emma and Adam's relationship deepened, it became clear that they were building something special. Adam wasn't just a partner. He was a teammate, a source of strength and understanding. He never tried to overshadow Emma's independence, instead supporting her as she rediscovered herself. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled through the park, Adam turned to Emma with a nervous smile. "I know you've been through a lot, and I never want to rush you, but I want to build a life with you, one that's ours, built on trust and love." Emma's heart swelled. "I want that too." It wasn't a dramatic proposal or a grand gesture. It was simple, honest, and perfect, just like the life they were creating together. Emma's story began to inspire others in ways she hadn't expected. The women's empowerment speech she had given turned into a series of speaking engagements where she shared her journey with audiences hungry for hope and inspiration. Each time she stood on stage, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just telling her story, she was showing others that it was possible to rebuild, to thrive, even after the hardest of times. Vanessa's life had taken a quieter turn after the events with Mark and David. She reached out to Emma one last time, not to seek forgiveness, but to express gratitude. "I know I was part of the pain you went through," Vanessa said during their final meeting, "but you've shown me that it's possible to change, to grow. Thank you for that." Emma nodded. "We all make mistakes. It's what we do after that matters." Their conversation wasn't about rekindling a friendship, but about closure, an acknowledgement that both women had grown beyond their shared past. Meanwhile, Claire had her own surprise in store. At a small dinner party with Emma, Adam, and a few close friends, Claire announced her engagement to her longtime boyfriend, Lucas. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. "You're next," Claire teased Emma with a wink. Emma laughed, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in a long time. Life was moving forward, not just for her, but for everyone she loved. As the seasons changed, Emma reflected on how far she had come. The woman who had been crushed by betrayal and fear was gone, replaced by someone stronger, bolder, and more at peace. One crisp autumn morning, Emma stood on a hill overlooking a field of wildflowers. She held a sketchpad in her hands, the pages filled with new designs and ideas. The wind rustled through her hair, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude for her journey, for her resilience, and for the life she was creating. "You're doing okay," she whispered to herself with a smile. "Better than okay." Emma's story wasn't about a perfect ending. It was about a new beginning. It was about finding strength in vulnerability, hope in heartbreak, and joy in the smallest of moments. It was about learning to let go of the past and embracing the future with open arms. Her journey wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Your support helps us continue to create content that resonates and uplifts. See you in the next video.